Hello everybody and welcome to CCJ3701, Research Methods in Criminology. I'm Dr. Jensen and today we're talking about literature reviews so you can kind of get an idea of what this section is about and think about its purpose and writing strategy. So when we talk about literature reviews, I remember when I first heard that word, it sounded like I was reviewing children's books, but you're not. The literature refers to the research literature on any given topic within a discipline or field. So it's the job of any research paper to do a precursory review of what the research says to date on this topic and its other relevant subtopics to really prepare the reader for what this study is going to be about, with any background information or relevant findings that will help them keep track of certain concepts and ideas. So there's a definite format to this. It's a little bit of an art and science, which I will describe, and you want to have a good strategy and approach. So let's get started. So when you're writing a literature review, besides enlarging your knowledge about the topic, a literature review really lets you gain and demonstrate skills in two areas. The first area is knowledge of the topic, right? So this is kind of the background information because we can't just expect the reader to know off the bat everything that we already know because we did the study. So this is preparatory writing that you need to do to kind of get your reader prepared. The other area is really information seeking, right? So essentially this is the ability to scan the literature efficiently and to identify a set of useful articles and books. So that way, if the reader is left with other questions or needs to seek more information, you've already given them a lay of the land and said, hey, these are the relevant authors, these are the subject matter experts who have gone into this in a lot of depth, so that they, again, have tools at their disposal to go further. The last part of a literature review really is what we call critical appraisal. So essentially this is the ability to apply the principles of analysis and identify unbiased and valid studies and determine their application to your study. So this is where you kind of take all these studies and say, all right, this is what we know. This is what has been identified and brought to the forefront today, so that the reader again can say, all right, what are we left with that's inconclusive? What are relationships and findings that are relevant? What are things we still have yet to get an answer to? So that they can kind of say, okay, these studies are useful, but there still are remaining questions. And what it does in this last part is it really kind of drives what we call the overall contribution of your study. So you're trying to help provide an argument as to why you should keep reading, right? We want to be very persuasive and say, look, yes, there are these studies that talk about the topic, and these are sets of useful articles and summaries, and kind of we weave them all together, but there are some areas that are very lacking, hence the reason for your study. So it helps them say, this is where you're going next, and these are the gaps in the current research that this study seeks to fill. So we're going to jump into the tips, how to conduct a literature review, just so you can get a sense of how the writing goes. So essentially, these are the tips that I give all my students. So first, be really organized around and related directly to the research topic you are developing. So sometimes that starts with a really good set of references and maybe an organized annotated bibliography. Now, what's an annotated bibliography? It's basically a little chart that has the citation and next to it a quick little summary or paragraph that describes the study, the major findings, the methodology, almost like a little abstract. And some people actually assemble annotated bibliographies by copying and pasting abstracts so that they can kind of have a table or a document that outlines and organizes all the articles they've come across to date that they might think are noteworthy or worth using as citations in their literature review. So that's kind of how you want to start your approach into organizing articles, is just start listing them, all the ones you've had a chance to scan and review, and put them in an order. You can start organizing them by topic. You can do a little bit of outlining that maybe presents a sequence, like I want to talk about this first and this next, right? So you want to think about how you're organizing your section. The second is you want to synthesize the results into a summary of what is and is not known. So that's where the kind of art comes from, is the synthesis, right? So everyone has their own writing style and how they like to present things. Some people like to kind of review the main ideas in the article first, describing why it's relevant, and then kind of wrap up that paragraph with some closing findings as to, this is what the study found, and this is what it means to us, right? Other people really like to just go right into the findings and go right into some criticisms about that article and what remains unknown or what was left behind or overlooked. Again, when you bring up criticisms in your synthesis of kind of reviewing all these articles on research and what's known, be careful how critical you are, because essentially your reader is going to expect you to address those criticisms with your study. So if you take too many swings at existing research articles, you kind of leave a lot of unanswered questions, and you leave the reader hanging with a lot of doubt and kind of unfulfilled dreams, if you will. So you want to make sure that if you're going to poke at a study and identify drawbacks or weaknesses, that you're not opening up this giant black hole that now you need to fill with your study, which your study may or may not be able to fill all of those gaps in research or all of those criticisms. So be mindful of that. Also, you want to identify areas of controversy in the literature where we have studies that say this, but then a whole group of studies over here say that, right? And really the results are kind of inconclusive because, we see studies going both directions. So a really good thing to run into when you're searching for literature and reviewing articles is what we call a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is kind of a study of studies. It's a gold mine. So somebody reviewed a lot of studies and looked for themes and patterns and findings and kind of did it en masse for you. So if you find a good meta-analysis on your topic, that can help you give, a really great overview on different areas as far as what's known and not known, and also get you started with the controversy. Make sure you formulate questions that need further research. Don't get too carried away, because again, you don't want to overpromise here. But that's a great way to kind of wrap up the section, is with your research question, so that it's very clear, this is what my study is seeking to do. After we've reviewed all this research, this is what we're going to try to accomplish together. And then finally, articles cited really should be relevant, appropriate, and useful, focused on interventions and outcomes. So sometimes people will pull studies that are international, and that can be a little bit of a reach because you're not doing an international study. You're doing a study maybe just on people in the United States. So are there cultural differences? Is it really relevant? Or maybe you cite a study that has one of the topics, but the other topic is kind of off, and you go, I don't see how this is relevant. Why should this matter? So if you find yourself really grasping at straws and stretching to make an article work in your literature review, chances are it really doesn't work. So if you find yourself struggling to implement an article, you may just be needing to ditch that article altogether. So, and it's painful sometimes because we think, oh, we did all this writing, and editing writing is like amputating body parts. I don't want to lose any of this writing in this time. But here's the thing I tell people, if you're building a house and you put in way too many windows and 5 roofs and 3 basements, that's a house that cannot stand, right? I mean, that is just a crazy house, and it's going to have problems. So sometimes there are necessary edits and amputations and things you have to eliminate to make it function better, right? So think about your literature review as providing the scaffolding of that house. And if you get extra windows and extra basements and extra roofs, it might be doing more harm than good. So think about it really building in that structure. Also, for your literature review, think of it as a piece of discursive prose. So discursive prose is not a list describing or summarizing one piece of literature after another. It really does give a bottom line, it gives interpretation, and it does that critical appraisal. That's where your voice comes in. So it's not just a dumping ground for your annotated bibliography or for lists of research articles and summaries of each article one after the other. That is just mind-numbing to read. And it's not terribly helpful to the reader because you're forcing the reader to come up with their own conclusions when you should be guiding the reader in that process. So discursive prose really does take that discussion element and do that synthesis. And again, that's the art, because you kind of use your own writer's voice to do it, to provide that synthesis for them. With your literature review, it's usually a bad sign to see every paragraph beginning with the name of a researcher. Instead, organize the literature review into topics or sections that present themes, or maybe identify some trends in the research. And then essentially you can just organize the articles into supporting evidence and arguments underneath each of those topics and themes. So again, that's where a little bit of outlining might be useful here, because it'll help give you an order and a sequence to things, and also tell you maybe which sections are really beefed up and which ones are lacking, which ones are kind of skimpy and which ones are overblown, because you can kind of see it organized as such before you even start writing it. Also, this is just a reminder, please limit the use of I and my in the drafts. We call this first person voice. And in papers like this in research, the predominant verdict on this is that we should use third person voice. It's a little too casual for a research paper to use I and my. There are some authors and researchers that disagree, but predominantly most people will say this study does this, or this study analyzed, this study describes, and it kind of takes more of a not as personal approach to the writing. So that's what we mean by that reminder. And then, of course, you do have some good options for replacing I and my. And this can be found throughout the draft, not only in your literature review, but maybe inside a methods section or a results section or a discussion section. So you could reword the sentence entirely. I recoded the alcohol use variable as alcohol use was recoded as, again, taking the personalization out of it. Or you could replace I found blah, blah, blah in this study as the present or current study found this. Or finally, again, do not add really casual commentary such as I think, I want, I believe. Just leave it out. I know you think this because you're writing it. That's kind of obvious. This is, again, a little too casual for a research paper. So instead, try the results suggest this. This study demonstrated that blank. This further evidences the need for this. Okay, so again, we're taking more of an objective approach rather than something more personal, because we're presenting this in a factual manner. So this slide I just like to include. It's, again, a really great tool. You can log in to turnitin.com, and we actually have a tool we just recently licensed at the University of Florida called Draft Coach, which can really help you with your writing when you may or may not be able to visit the writing center and get an appointment with a tutor or an advisor to help you with your writing if writing is something you struggle with. There are some built-in kind of AI draft coaching tutors that can really help you with writing origination and revising sections. So I invite you to check that out. And also be sure to adhere to proper citation. Here is a link from Turnitin, and again, it's called Navigating the Plagiarism Spectrum. And I usually send this out as an announcement in class as well, that shows you some common mistakes that undergraduates make in paper writing, where they get a little too crazy with copy-paste, they don't do proper attribution, and then they run into plagiarism issues, which is an academic dishonesty violation, and you don't want to run into that in this class. But I know some plagiarism is often accidental, where you forgot a citation. Some plagiarism is very blatant and deliberate. So again, you don't want to get into that territory. So use the tools at your fingertips to run your draft through Turnitin.com ahead of time before you even submit it to your professor. You can do that. You can use your UFL account and actually push your writing through those origination tools to check it. So that way there are no surprises on the back end. So other than that, that was just a quick run through and lesson on your approach and strategy for literature reviews. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out, and we can definitely do some editing and writing sessions together as you draft. So otherwise, good luck, and we'll see you in the next lecture.